I can't wait for you to die.
After a fatal shootout, Min Jun was confined to a hospital bed, paralyzed but conscious. Then, his girlfriend leaned in close and whispered the truth. She orchestrated the shooting. She couldn't wait to pull the plug, but no one knew he heard every word. Now, what happens when the only person who notices you're still alive is a night nurse who has everything to lose? Would you sacrifice your entire career and safety for a stranger? Especially when that stranger is a dying mafia boss whose girlfriend is already planning your next shift to be your last. The bullet tore through his skull before he even saw it coming. One moment, Min Jun was signing contracts in the private suite. The next, he was on the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. His second-in-command, Jae-hyun, was screaming into a phone. His girlfriend Rachel was crying, her perfectly manicured hands covering her mouth. Then everything went black. When Min Jun opened his eyes again, he was staring at a white ceiling. Fluorescent lights burned above him. He tried to sit up, but his body would not respond. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. Panic clawed through his chest. He could hear everything: machines beeping, footsteps, hushed voices discussing his condition like he was already dead. Severe traumatic brain injury with extensive damage to the frontal and parietal lobes, a doctor said somewhere to his left. The voice was clinical, bored even. Minimal brain activity, Glasgow coma scale of 3. He's essentially gone. We're keeping the body alive, but the person, he's not coming back. I'm right here, Min Jun screamed inside his head. I'm right here. I can hear you. I'm not gone. But his body was a tomb he couldn't claw his way out of. The doctor continued. We'll maintain life support for now, but the family should start making arrangements. Realistically, he's got weeks at most. Could be days. Days bled together in that hospital room. Min Jun learned to mark time by the shift. Changes, the medication schedules, the visits from people he thought he could trust. Rachel came every afternoon, dabbing her eyes with tissues, playing the devoted girlfriend for the cameras outside. Jae-hyun visited in the evenings, his face carefully neutral as he discussed business transitions with the lawyers who hovered like vultures. No one knew he could hear them. No one knew he was screaming inside this useless body. 3 weeks into his nightmare, Rachel arrived late at night. She must have thought the nurses were gone, as she leaned close to his ear, close enough that her perfume made his eyes water. That same Chanel No. 5 she'd worn the day they met, now sickly sweet and suffocating. I can't wait for you to die, she whispered. Her breath was warm against his ear. Every day you keep breathing is another day I have to pretend to care. Do you know how exhausting that is, playing the grieving girlfriend for the cameras? Min Jun's heart monitor spiked. The machine beeped. Faster, louder. Rachel laughed softly. Everything you built, every dollar, every connection, every dirty secret, it's all mine now. Well, mine and Jae-hyun's. She traced one finger down his arm, the touch mockingly tender. We planned this for months, you know. The shooter was mine. $50,000 and a plane ticket to Manila. The meeting was Jae-hyun's idea. The alibi was perfect. And now I just have to wait for you to stop breathing. She straightened, smoothing her dress. They're going to pull life support next week. Medical necessity. Brain death. Jae-hyun's already got the doctors lined up to sign off. It'll all be very legal, very proper. She leaned down one last time, her lips brushing his forehead like a blessing. Goodbye, Min Jun. Thanks for everything. And walked out. Min Jun's heart monitor spiked. Rage and terror flooded through him in equal measure. He had survived the bullet only to be trapped while his own people dismantled everything he had built. Worse, they were planning to finish the job. An hour later, The night nurse entered for vitals check. Min-jun had seen her before, a quiet woman with dark skin and tired eyes who moved through his room like a shadow. She checked his IV line and adjusted his blankets with an efficiency that spoke of too many double shifts. Her name tag read Thandi Wei. She glanced at the heart monitor and frowned. "Your heart rate was elevated earlier," she said, more to herself than to him. She pulled up the logs on the computer, scrolling through the data, right around the time your girlfriend visited. Her frown deepened. "That's the third time this week." Thandiwe looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. She was thinking. Min-jun wished he could tell her everything, could beg her to look closer, to see what everyone else was missing. She adjusted his pillow with careful hands before leaving the room, but he noticed how her gaze lingered on the monitor one last time. The next night, Thandiwe came in earlier than usual. She moved around the room restocking supplies, but Min-jun could feel her attention on him. She was testing something. She stepped to the left side of his bed, and without meaning to, his eyes tracked her movement. She froze. Slowly, deliberately, she moved to the right. His eyes followed. "Oh my God!" Thandiwe's voice was barely a whisper. She approached the bed, her hands shaking. "You're in there. You're actually in there, aren't you?" Min-jun tried desperately to make his eyes move again, to confirm what she had seen. Up, he thought. Look up. Please, God, let me look up. With every ounce of will he possessed, with every shred of consciousness left to him, he dragged his gaze upward. Thandiwe gasped. "If you can hear me, look up for yes. Up. Look down for no. Down. Oh God, okay." She pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. "How long have you been conscious?" He looked up. "Since you woke up?" Up. "And no one knows?" Up. Thandiwe pulled up a chair, her professional composure cracking. She sat down heavily, her scrubs wrinkling as she leaned forward. "I need to tell the doctors. We need to run tests and figure out what's happening and get you proper care." Min-jun looked down sharply. "No." "What do you mean no? You need help." "Down, down, down." She stared at him, her brown eyes widening with understanding. "You don't want the doctors to know." It was not a question. Why? Min-jun could not explain about Rachel, about Jae-hyun, about the conspiracy that was tightening around him like a noose. He looked up, then down, frustrated by the limitations of their communication. If only he could speak. If only he could warn her about the danger she was walking into just by talking to him. Thandiwe bit her lip, thinking, "Are you in danger?" Up. "From someone in the hospital." Up. "Someone who visits you." Up. Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Your girlfriend?" Up. Jesus. Thandiwe stood, pacing the small room. Her sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor. "I should report this. I should tell someone." Down. "You don't trust anyone here." Up. She stopped pacing and looked at him, not at the machines or the chart or the monitors, but at him, at the person trapped inside this broken body. "But you trust me." Min-jun had no choice. This woman with her careful hands and quiet presence was the only person who had bothered to truly see him. He looked up. Thandiwe nodded slowly. Okay, I'll figure this out. But I need you to work with me. Can you do that?" Up. She glanced at the door, then back at him. "I'm going to come back tomorrow night with something that might help. A letterboard. Do you know what that is?" Up. "Good. We'll try to communicate properly then. But right now, I need to finish my rounds before anyone gets suspicious." She walked to the door, then paused. "I don't know why I'm doing this. You're Min-jun Park. I've seen your face on the news. I know what you are." She shook her head. "But nobody deserves what's happening to you." Over the next 3 nights, Thandiwe became his lifeline. She smuggled in a modified letterboard, holding it in his field of vision while he painstakingly spelled out words with his eyes. It was exhausting work that left him mentally drained, but slowly, the truth emerged. So Rachel and Jae-hyun planned the ambush together, Thandiwe said on the 3rd night, her voice low. She was sitting cross-legged in the chair beside his bed, her notepad balanced on her knee. And they're going to pull your life support within the week. Up, they're going to kill you legally, she continued, her voice tight with anger. They've been laying the groundwork, forged medical opinions, falsified brain scans. I've seen the orders being processed. Min-jun spelled out 3 letters with agonizing slowness. W-H-Y. Why am I helping you? Thandiwe laughed bitterly. She set down the letter, bored, and rubbed her face with both hands. Good question. You're a criminal. I know who you are, what you've done. I've seen the news reports, the raids, the arrests, the bodies. She met his eyes, but I took an oath, even for you. Murder is murder, and I won't be part of it. She started documenting everything after that. Visitor logs, suspicious medication orders. She set her phone to record when Rachel visited, capturing whispered conversations about funeral arrangements and asset transfers. She noted which staff members avoided eye contact, which ones asked too many questions about his care schedule. Min-jun guided her with patient eye movements, spelling out names of his loyal people, locations where evidence was hidden, details about his organization that could expose the conspiracy. They worked in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn when the ICU was understaffed and no one paid attention to the night nurse tending to a dying mafia boss. Thandiwe learned things about herself during those long nights. She learned that she was braver than she thought, that her instincts were sharper than she gave herself credit for, and that somewhere along the way she had started to care about the man in the bed, the one who could only speak with his eyes. On the 5th night, a woman Thandiwe had never seen before showed up wearing scrubs and an agency nurse badge. I'm here to help with the overflow, she said, her smile too bright, her eyes too sharp. Thandiwe's instincts screamed, We didn't call for backup. Administration sent me. ICU is short-staffed tonight. I'll check with the charge nurse. Thandiwe reached for the phone, but the woman was already moving past her, heading toward Min-jun's room with purposeful strides. Thandiwe saw the syringe palmed in her hand, and her body moved before her mind caught up. She tackled the woman 3 feet from Min-jun's bed. They hit the floor hard, the syringe skittering across the tiles. Alarms blared. Security pounded down the hallway. The fake nurse fought like a trained operative, throwing elbows and trying to break free, but Thandiwe had grown up in Johannesburg townships where survival was learned young. She held on until security dragged them apart. The woman fled before anyone could stop her, disappearing down the stairwell like smoke. The syringe was recovered and tested. Potassium chloride, enough to stop a heart in seconds. Hospital administration called Thandiwe into an office the next morning. The supervisor was a thin woman with glasses and a permanent frown. We need to discuss your behavior last night. I stopped someone from killing a patient, Thandiwe said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. You assaulted a healthcare worker based on paranoia. She had a syringe full of poison, which we're still investigating, but your recent conduct has raised concerns. Inappropriate emotional attachment to a patient, paranoia, stress. The supervisor folded her hands. We're recommending mandatory counselling, and if you cannot maintain professional boundaries, we'll have no choice but to suspend you. Thandiwe sat in Min-jun's room afterward, her hands shaking with exhaustion and fear. The morning sun was creeping through the blinds, painting stripes across his still form. I can't protect you if they fire me, she whispered. I'm just a nurse. I don't have the power to stop this. Minjun looked up. You can, she laughed, the sound broken. How? He looked at the letterboard she had hidden under his blanket. Slowly, painfully, he spelled out a name. Seokjin. Seokjin, Thandiwe read aloud. Who is that? Headofsecurity. You're head of security. She pulled out her phone. You want me to contact him? Up. And you trust him? Up. How do I know he's not part of the conspiracy? Minjun spelled out another message. ASKHIMABOUTBUSAN. Over the next hour, Minjun spelled out specific details that only his loyal security chief would know. Private conversations, shared memories, codes that had never been written down. Thandiwe memorized every word. That night, she made a call from a burner phone she bought at a convenience store. A man answered on the third ring. Who is this? My name is Thandiwe Nkosi. I'm a nurse at Seoul National University Hospital. I need to talk to you about Minjun Park. Silence. Then, carefully, he's in a coma. No, he's not, and I can prove it. What happened in Busan 3 years ago that only you and he know about? Another pause, longer this time. She could hear his breathing, could sense him deciding whether to hang up. Finally, how do you know about Busan? He told me, Thandiwe said. Through eye movements. He's conscious, Seokjin. He's been conscious this whole time, and they're going to kill him in 3 days. The phone call lasted 40 minutes. Thandiwe sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, the burner phone pressed to her ear, and told Seokjin everything, every detail Minjun had spelled out, every conversation she'd recorded, every suspicious order, every altered document, every piece of the conspiracy that had been assembled under everyone's noses. When she finished, there was a long silence. I need 24 hours, Seokjin finally said. His voice was different now, no longer wary, but sharp, focused. Can you keep him alive for 24 hours? They're terminating life support in 3 days. Then, we have time. But barely. A pause. Why are you doing this? Thandiwe looked through the windshield at the hospital. 7 stories of concrete and glass where people died and were saved in equal measure. Because it's my job. Your job is to monitor vitals and change IV bags. My job, she said quietly, is to protect my patients, even the ones everyone else has given up on. She heard something that might have been respect in Seokjin's answering silence. I'll be in touch, said, and disconnected. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Thandiwe worked her day shift on autopilot, checking other patients, administering medications, documenting vitals. But her mind was in Minjun's room, counting down the hours. Rachel visited at her usual time, staying for exactly 12 minutes, playing her part for the cameras with practiced grief. Jae-hyun came in the evening, conferring with lawyers about estate matters in low, satisfied tones. No one noticed Thandiwe listening from the hallway. No one thought the night nurse mattered. At 11:47 p.m, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow night, 3 a.m. Be ready. She deleted the message and went to check on Minjun. He was awake, as much as he could be awake, his eyes tracking her as she entered. She held up the letterboard out of habit now. Tomorrow night, she whispered. It's happening tomorrow night. His eyes moved up. Yes. Are you scared? A long pause. Then down, up, down. Yes and no. She understood. Fear of failure. Fear of dying anyway. But also hope. The first real hope he'd had since the bullet tore through his skull. She squeezed his hand, felt no response, but did it anyway. I'll be here. Up. I know. The next night, Thandiwe arrived for her shift with her stomach twisted in knots. She went through her usual routines, but her eyes kept flicking to the clock. 2:45 a.m., 2:52 a.m., 2:58 a.m. At exactly 3 a.m., Minjun's heart monitor flatlined. The alarm was deafening in the quiet ICU. Thandiwe ran into the room, shouting for help, beginning chest compressions with mechanical precision. Other nurses flooded in. The night supervisor, the on-call doctor, still bleary from sleep. "What happened?" the doctor demanded. "I don't know. He just crashed." Thandiwe kept compressions going, counting in her head. They worked for 18 minutes. Epinephrine, defibrillation, more compressions, nothing. The heart monitor remained flat. That terrible unbroken line. The doctor finally stepped back. Time of death, 3:19 a.m. Rachel arrived within 20 minutes. How had she gotten there so fast? Her face carefully arranged in shock. Jae-hyun appeared 10 minutes later, his expression grave but his eyes cold and satisfied. They stood in the hallway while staff disconnected machines, while Thandiwe covered Minjun's face with a sheet. "I can't believe he's gone," Rachel whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her voice broke perfectly. "I wasn't ready. I thought we'd have more time." Thandiwe watched her performance and felt nothing but disgust, but she kept her face neutral, her voice professional. "I'm sorry for your loss." Rachel nodded, dabbing at dry eyes. "What happens now?" "The body will be transferred to the morgue," the supervisor said, "then to the funeral home of your choosing." "Of course. I'll make the arrangements." Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Jae-hyun put a comforting arm around her. They left together, whispering to each other. And Thandiwe saw Rachel's lips curve into the smallest smile before she schooled her expression back to grief. The body was transferred to the morgue at 4:30 a.m. Thandiwe watched the gurney roll away, Minjun's face still covered, and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Either this worked, or she'd just helped fake the death of a patient and would lose everything: her license, her career, possibly her freedom. But she'd made her choice. She'd chosen to see him when no one else would. Her shift ended at 7 a.m. She went home, lay on her bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone stayed silent. The morning stretched into afternoon. She checked the news. Nothing yet. Rachel and Jae-hyun would wait a few days before making the death public, she knew. They'd want to ensure everything was in order first. At 6:47 p.m, her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "He's safe. Well done." Thandiwe closed her eyes and breathed for what felt like the first time in hours. Minjun woke up in a room he didn't recognize. Not the hospital. He knew every inch of that prison. This was somewhere else. Concrete walls, a single window with reinforced glass, medical equipment that looked military-grade rather than civilian, and he could feel his fingers. It was a small sensation, barely there, but it was real. He concentrated, pouring all his will into his right hand, and his index finger twitched. "Boss!" Seok-jin's face appeared above him, older than Minjun remembered, more weathered. "Welcome back." Minjun tried to speak, but his throat was too dry, his vocal cords too damaged from weeks of intubation. A croak emerged, nothing more. "Don't push it," Seok-jin said. "The doctors say you'll recover, but it's going to take time. Months, maybe. They've set up a full rehabilitation program." Minjun's eyes asked the question. "Where?" "Safe house in the mountains, 3 hours from Seoul. No one knows we're here except people I trust with my life." Seok-jin pulled up a chair. "The nurse, Thandiwe, she saved you. You know that, right? Without her, you'd be in a morgue for real right now." Minjun knew. He'd known it every time she held up that letterboard. Every time she came back despite the danger, every time she chose to see him when the world had already declared him dead. The rehabilitation was agony. Physical therapists worked his atrophied muscles until he wanted to scream. Speech therapists made him practice sounds like he was a child learning to talk. Occupational therapists forced him through basic tasks, holding a spoon, gripping a pen, that felt impossible. But Min Jun had survived a bullet to the head and weeks of being buried alive in his own body. He could survive this. 6 weeks in, he managed to lift his arm. 8 weeks in, he spoke his first word in months. More, the therapist blinked. More exercises? Min Jun nodded slowly, his neck muscles screaming. More! He was fighting his way back, and when he got there, Rachel and Jae-hyun would learn what a mistake they'd made. On a Tuesday afternoon in his 10th week of rehabilitation, Thandiwe walked into the safe house. Min Jun was in the physical therapy room, struggling through resistance band exercises when he heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. He turned, still slow, still deliberate. But he could turn now, and saw her. She looked the same, tired eyes, scrubs under a winter coat. But her expression when she saw him standing was pure shock. You're walking? Barely. His voice was still rough, still weak, but it was his voice. You came. Seok-jin called me, said you wanted to see me. She set down her bag, taking in the equipment, the sparse room, the evidence of his recovery. I should have come sooner. I wanted to, but I thought maybe it was better to stay away, let you focus on getting better. Why did you help me? The question had been burning in him for months. You knew what I was. Thandiwe was quiet for a long moment. She pulled up a chair and sat, her hands folded in her lap. When I looked at you in that hospital bed, I didn't see a criminal. I saw someone trapped, someone still fighting even though no one knew it. She met his eyes. I saw someone who deserved a chance. I don't deserve anything. Maybe not. But you're a person, and people deserve not to be murdered in their sleep. Min Jun sat down slowly, his legs shaking from the exertion. You should leave. Go back to your life. This is almost over. What's almost over? My recovery. He smiled, and it felt strange on his face. He hadn't smiled in so long. And their reckoning. Rachel stood in Min Jun's private estate, her private estate now, and surveyed the assembled crowd with satisfaction. Lawyers, accountants, key business associates, all here to finalise the transfer of assets, to officially divide up the empire Min Jun had built. It had taken 3 months of careful manoeuvring, but she'd done it. Every account, every property, every connection, all hers. Well, hers and Jae-hyun's. They'd split it 60-40, her favour. She'd planned the hit, after all. She deserved the larger share. Shall we begin? One of the lawyers asked, opening his briefcase. The door to the study opened. Min Jun walked in. The room went silent. Someone dropped a pen. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face, felt her carefully constructed world tilt sideways and shatter. Did you miss me? Min Jun asked. His voice was still rough, but his eyes were sharp, focused, and absolutely furious. Jae-hyun lunged for the gun at his waistband, but Seok-jin was faster, his own weapon already drawn and pointed. Don't. Rachel's mind raced, calculating. She forced a trembling smile, took a step toward Min Jun. Oh my God, you're alive. We thought you were dead. This is a miracle. Stop. Min Jun's voice cut through her performance like a blade. I was conscious, Rachel, the entire time. I heard everything. Her smile faltered. The hospital room at 2:47 a.m. You couldn't wait for me to die. Everything I built was yours. You and Jae-hyun planned it for months. He pulled out a phone, pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room. I can't wait for you to die. Everything you built, it's mine now. Her face went white. I have everything, Minjun continued. Every conversation, every forged document, every payment you made. The shooter in Manila found him, by the way, very cooperative once we explained the situation. He looked at Jae-hyun. Your offshore accounts, your communications with the Yakuza, promising them my territories once I was gone. All of it. Jae-hyun's expression was murderous. You should have stayed dead, probably. Minjun moved farther into the room, still slow but steady. But I had help. Someone who saw me when I was invisible. Someone who gave a damn when no one else did. He nodded to Seok-jin. Security moved to block the exits. Rachel tried to run anyway, a desperate sprint for the door, but strong hands caught her arms. What are you going to do? She spat. The facade was completely gone now, replaced by raw hatred. Kill us? You're not that stupid. You're right. I'm not going to kill you. Minjun's smile was cold. That would be too quick, too clean. No, I'm going to give you to the people you betrayed when you promised them my territories. The Yakuza, the Triads, every organization you sold out in your rush to divide up my empire. Rachel's eyes widened with understanding, with terror. They're very creative with traitors. Minjun continued, much more creative than I ever was. Consider it a learning experience. Jaehyun was shouting now, struggling against security. But it was over. They both knew it. Minjun watched them being dragged out, Rachel screaming threats and then pleas. Jae-hyun, silent and stiff, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. When they were gone, the room emptied except for Minjun and Seok-jin. The police, Seok-jin asked. Invited, they'll find evidence of the conspiracy, the attempted murder, the embezzlement, enough to make arrests, secure convictions, nothing that traces back to our other operations. Minjun sat down, heavily, in his desk chair. His legs were shaking again. Clean. Cleaner than I expected. Seok-jin holstered his weapon. What about the nurse? What about her? She's a loose end. Minjun's head snapped up, his eyes dangerous. She's not a loose end. She's under protection, permanent protection. Anyone touches her, they answer to me personally. Seok-jin raised his hands. Understood, boss. Just checking. When he left, Minjun sat alone in his study and stared at the walls. His empire was secure. The traitors were dealt with. Everything was back under control. So why did it feel hollow? Thandiwe was restocking supply cabinets when she saw him. She'd returned to work at the hospital 2 weeks after the confrontation at the estate. Seok-jin had called to tell her it was safe, that the threats were neutralized, that she could resume her normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every time she checked vitals on a comatose patient, she wondered if they could hear her. Every time she passed Minjun's old room, she remembered those long nights spelling out messages, one letter at a time. Minjun stood in the ICU hallway, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide how much weight he'd lost. He was walking without assistance now, his movements almost natural, but she could see the strain around his eyes, the way he held himself like every step still hurt. You recovered, she said. You saved me. I'm just a nurse. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. You're the only person who saw me when I was invisible. Thandiwe felt her throat tighten. I should get back to work. I wanted to thank you. Properly. Anything you want. Money, a new position, relocation, anything. Just name it. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man who'd spelled out his life story with eye movements, the man who'd trusted her when he had no other choice, the man who was trying to pay off a debt that couldn't be paid. I didn't do it for a reward, she said quietly. His expression flickered. surprise, confusion. Then why? Because it was right. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language, like the concept of doing something without expecting compensation was incomprehensible. Maybe it was, in his world. I should go, Thandiwe said. She walked away before he could respond, before she could see the look in his eyes, before she could acknowledge the ache in her chest that had nothing to do with ethics or oaths or doing the right thing. 3 weeks later, Thandiwe's life had returned to its familiar rhythm, day shifts and night shifts, difficult patients and grateful families, student loan payments and grocery shopping and all the mundane details that made up an ordinary existence. She told herself she'd done the right thing. She told herself that walking away was smart, safe, the only reasonable choice. Min-jun belonged to a world she wanted no part of, violence and crime and moral compromises she couldn't make. She told herself these things every night when she lay awake, remembering his eyes looking at her from that hospital bed, every time she wondered if he thought about her too. Then someone tried to kill her. It happened fast, a car jumping the curb as she walked home from a late shift, aiming straight for her. She dove behind a parked vehicle, felt the rush of air as the car missed her by inches. It sped away, no license plate visible, leaving her gasping on the cold pavement. Thandiwe went to her apartment, locked the door, and tried to process what had happened. A random attack, or something more targeted. At 11 p.m, someone knocked on her door. She looked through the peephole and saw Min-jun standing in her hallway, flanked by 2 large men in dark suits. She opened the door. "What are you doing here? There's a contract on you." His voice was tight, controlled. "Allies of Rachel and Jae-hyun, retaliation for helping me." The words hit her like a physical blow. "I thought you said it was safe." "I thought it was. I was wrong." He stepped closer, his expression fierce. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me." "I'm not going anywhere." "Thandiwe." The way he said her name, like a prayer, like a curse, made her stop. "You're in danger because of me. Let me protect you, please." She looked at his face, saw the guilt and fear warring there, and realized he blamed himself for her risk, for her danger, for the fact that saving him had put a target on her back. "How long?" she asked. "Until I eliminate the threat. Could be days, could be weeks." Thandiwe thought about her apartment, her job, her carefully constructed safe life. Then she thought about the car that had tried to run her down, about the people who wanted her dead for the crime of showing compassion. "Give me 10 minutes to pack," she said. The safe house was different from the rehabilitation facility, more comfortable, more lived in. A cabin in the mountains with a view of snow-covered peaks, security cameras hidden in the trees, armed guards stationed at every approach. They sat in the living room that first night, an awkward silence stretching between them. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled through the pines. "Why did you really help me?" Min-jun finally asked. Thandiwe had known this question would come eventually. She'd been preparing the answer in her head for weeks. Something professional and distant about medical ethics and human rights. But sitting here in the firelight, watching him, watch her with those dark eyes that had once spelled out desperate messages, 1 letter at a time, she couldn't lie. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone trapped, someone still fighting even though the world had given up on them." She paused. "I saw someone who deserved to be seen. And now?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Now I see someone trying." She met his gaze, someone who could be more than what they were. Min-jun moved before she could think, crossing the space between them, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "I don't know how to be what you need. I'm not asking you to be anything except honest." He kissed her, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. Thandiwe kissed him back and felt something break open in her chest, something she'd been keeping locked away since the night she first saw his eyes track her across that hospital room. When they broke apart, Minjun rested his forehead against hers. "I'll never be a good man. I know. My world is violent, dangerous, morally complicated on the best days. I know that too. But I can be better. For you, I can try to be better." Thandiwe pulled back to look at him properly. "I need you to promise me something. No innocent casualties, no collateral damage. The people who come after me, fine. Protect me, but not at the cost of people who don't deserve it." He was quiet for a long moment. In his world, promises like that were weaknesses, limitations that could get you killed. "Okay," he finally said. "For you, I promise." 6 months later, Thandiwe woke up in unfamiliar sheets. It took her a moment to remember where she was. Minjun's penthouse, 40 stories above Seoul, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering city. She'd refused to give up her job at the hospital, refused to move in permanently, refused to become another possession in his carefully controlled world. But she came here. Sometimes, when her shift ended, when she needed to see him, when the space between them felt too large. Minjun was sitting in the chair by the window, watching her sleep. "You're staring," she mumbled, still half asleep. "You see me." His voice was soft, wondering. "After everything you've learned about me, everything you've seen, you still see me. I can't believe that sometimes." Thandiwe sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "I see you. All of you. The good parts and the terrible parts and everything in between. And you stayed, and I stayed." She smiled. "Despite my better judgment, despite the fact that you're still technically a criminal and I'm still technically a healthcare professional, and this relationship violates about 17 different ethical guidelines." He crossed to the bed, sat beside her, took her hand. His grip was strong now, steady. The weakness from his injury was gone, replaced by a different kind of strength, one that had been tested and rebuilt from nothing. "I restructured operations," he said. "Fewer protection rackets, more legitimate business fronts. No more drug shipments through civilian ports. It's not perfect. I'm not clean, but it's better." "I know." She'd seen the changes, had watched him struggle with compromises that probably seemed insane to his organisation. "Why?" "Because you asked me to. Because when you look at me, I want to be worth seeing." Thandiwe kissed him, slow and deliberate. "You were always worth seeing, even when you were trapped and helpless and terrified. That's what you need to understand. I didn't stay for who you might become. I stayed for who you already were. A monster in a cage. A person who survived, who fought back, who trusted me when trust could have gotten you killed." She squeezed his hand. "That's who I saw. That's who I still see." Minjun pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and held on like she was the only real thing in his world. Maybe she was. Maybe that was enough. Outside, Seoul woke up to another day. Millions of people living ordinary lives, never knowing that somewhere in a penthouse above them, a criminal and a nurse had found something impossible. They'd found each other when he was invisible, when no one else was looking, when the world had already written him off. And somehow, against all logic and reason and common sense, they'd chosen to stay. And that's it, lovelies. Sometimes the strongest love is found when someone truly sees you, when you're at your weakest, when the world has already written you off. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves intense emotional storytelling like this. Remember, stay soft in a hard world, stay curious, and stay loving. I'll see you in the next story.